Hello, everyone. You are listening to the C Squared podcast with Corey and Curtis. Today, we have a super awesome guest, Miss Tracy Vera of Metal Blade Records, president of Metal Blade Records. She has agreed to join us today, and we're super glad to have her here. She's had an impressive career in metal, so get ready for some massive knowledge bombs to drop on y'all. But first, I do just want to say thank you for joining us today. We're super happy to have you on the podcast.
Nice to be here.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And so for the people who may not really know like your history or anything like that, do you want to just give like a brief overview of how you got started in the industry and you know what brought you into the industry?
Sure. Well, huge fan of heavy metal, obviously, and I was just working at a restaurant and going to college, and a friend of mine got a job at a record shop, and she called me up and said, "Hey, there's an opening here at this record store, and you love music so much, you should get down here right away and see if you can get the job." And so I did, and you know, I never looked back. That was the most fun job I've ever had, working at a record store. After a while, I became the heavy metal buyer, just because I was really into heavy metal and nobody else in the store was. And then I eventually became the manager. And I also started to do a heavy metal radio show at a local station. And from those contacts that I made in those two places, I met a lot of people that worked in the metal industry in the 80s. You know, people like Maria Ferraro from Adrenaline PR, but, you know, and people at Roadrunner, and also Cheryl Valentine, who worked at Metal Blade. And, you know, I just made a lot of contacts, and I was like, oh my God, there's this business, you know, I wonder if I could get a job like they have, you know? So eventually in 1990, I moved out to LA, and I did some field marketing for MCA for a while, but then I ended up getting a job at Metal Blade after about 6 months in retail marketing. And I just grew up there at Metal Blade over the last 30 years. And, did everything from production to booking, advertising, some legal work, production, you know, I already said production, and obviously marketing. But yeah, so here I am.
So what is it exactly that you do at Metal Blade? Like your role as president, like, can you kind of define for everybody what that actually means?
Yeah, you know, I used to do more logistical stuff. And recently when Brian made me president, it started to shift, or it did shift even more into really overseeing the entire operation from the bottom, or from the top down. And so I have a general manager who's also fantastic, Heather Parsons, who does most of the logistics and production stuff now. And so mostly I focus on legal and financial overseeing. You know, I have an accountant and everything who's also wonderful, Diana Tanda. And I work on all the hiring and firing and royalties, oversee royalties, you know, but mostly it's in a overseeing capacity. Yeah, and we work on the entire direction of the label, although I do that in conjunction with Brian Slagle, whose vision is the label.
So you're kind of like the boss, but Brian still like got the role of founder, I guess, as vision, right?
Yes.
Cool. Very cool. Can you kind of go over just a little bit on what the different roles are at Metal Blade that are kind of under you, then just like kind of differentiate? Because I know a lot of people probably go to you and want to get signed, but I'm assuming at least, is that correct?
Yes. But we have A&R staff, both on both sides of the ocean, and pretty much everybody can put something forth, if you will. And have, you know, I've brought stuff in directly myself. And then we also have like Ryan Williams, who works in A&R, and Mike Faley is very important with A&R, and he's been doing that for a long time as well. And Brian himself will often bring things in. For example, he was very pivotal in signing Killswitch Engage.
Oh, Cool.
And then I think there was a second part to that question, but I forgot what it was already.
It was just basically kind of like how a band would go about who would they kind of contact, like if they wanted to like actually get in touch with somebody at Metal Blade about getting signed, because obviously I don't think it would be you directly. It would probably be Ryan, I would think.
Yes, generally that would be Ryan.
Cool. So basically what would they do? They just kind of like email them, or?
Yeah, I think on our website there's like explicit instructions. I don't think we take demo tapes anymore, although for a long time we did. I think that we request a link to music and whatever else is going on, and with the band. But sometimes we reach out to bands directly, like we're always on the lookout as well. So, and I know that it might be interesting to know what would attract a label's attention as well. So, we're always looking to see what social media stats a band is actually built around themselves. It's like, it used to sort of be that you might record a demo and then send it to a label without ever actually playing a show or publishing that music anywhere. And I think that, at least for a label of our size, that doesn't really work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Yeah, that's actually leading into the next question of what you guys actually look for when you're looking at potential bands. So we've got, social media. I'm sure it's not just all about the numbers, but also what kind of engagement that they get and things like that. But what other kind of things are you looking at? Are you looking at their image? Are you looking at how many shows they've played? What kind of things should bands really put a lot of effort into making sure that they're on point to attract your or any label's attention, really?
Yeah, it's all that. It's we look at, and then even a lot of times bands will have music out on Spotify or whatever now, or SoundCloud, and we look at every stat. We look at Bandcamp. When we are making decisions about signing, usually Ryan or someone will compile all those stats, and we'll discuss them in the office, and we'll talk about even just the musical flavor of the band and where they might fit, marketing wise. And another thing that I think is important, or that we've done a lot, is there's a lot of labels out there that are smaller labels that might be a good place for a band to start before Metal Blade, to sort of it depends on the type of band they are, like, and if they need that physical push, especially in Europe. There's a lot of great small labels that deal with more like mail order and direct to consumer sales, and it's a really good place for bands to sort of cut their teeth and grow up and get that experience, and then play some shows, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, just out of the gate, it's hard to build something from zero. And I think where our team comes in, or where we do our best work, is when a band has already gotten a little something going, and then we can bring you to the next level. Not that I want to poach bands from smaller labels who I actually really admire, but often those labels will make deals that are for one album, or or whatever. So it's appropriate anyway. So,
Tracy, I have a bit of a follow-up to that, because I know one thing a lot of people will say is, you got to have the focus on the music, obviously, right, as being like the key thing. But can you kind of go over like how big in numbers you got a label like you guys would be looking for when you're talking about Spotify plays and the social media, if you have a number?
We've signed everything from this really tiny numbers all the way up. It's more about being able to sort of gauge what kind of a deal we'll offer, like in terms of the money, how much, and also just getting a sense of the flavor of the band. Like, there might be a band that doesn't really perform on Spotify, but they've sold a lot of units direct to consumer, or or in Bandcamp. So we might look at doing a different sort of deal, like a band where they have higher streaming numbers might want a really high digital rate but not really care about the physical rate as much, whereas a band that has the flip side of that might be looking for a higher physical rate or a different sort of deal structure.
Yeah, I guess it kind of depends upon what kind of numbers they have from what source then. So
it's very complicated nowadays.
yeah,
Oh yeah, with all the different methods of distributing your music and all the different outlets and everything, it does get a little tricky figuring everything out.
Yeah. Now, I just wanted to clarify just on one thing. When do you think a band would be ready to actually make the jump to a label versus releasing independently? Like, what would be your opinion? Like, you said you want something there already, but like, what would you do? Like, if you're an independent band, when would you start looking at making the jump to a label?
Well, I mean, again, it's kind of varied. Like, we have a band called Midnight, and they had several releases out, full album releases, and they always wanted to be independent. And at a certain point, though, it did become important to them to get to that next level, and so they finally made the jump. And we had been watching them and talking to them for a long time. But then there's a lot of other bands like Kardashev. It's a new release that we have out. They had one, I think it's like an EP. And so it just kind of depends on the band.
Fair enough.
There's no one answer.
Yeah, no, fair enough. It's just a common question people get asked. Yeah. So, like, I know if you don't really know, it's like, I guess it kind of depends on how much they tour and how much they actually sell and what they're looking to do, type of a thing.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that scene from The Notebook where he's asking, what do you want? And she just can't answer because there's no one exact specific answer to it all. But what would you say is the number one like piece of advice you would give to a new band that's maybe on the cusp of, being ready to start label shopping? What's the one thing you would say, this is the thing you need to keep in mind when you're doing that?
One thing. Well, I mean, it's got to come down to the music. It's the, make sure that it's great. I don't know what else to say. It really, it's, all social media aside and all sales aside, we often just say, hell with it, this band's amazing. We're just gonna work with this band because we love them and we all love them. And usually it'll end up paying off in the end.
That's another question that I had. When it comes to signing a band, you guys tend to work on it, like everybody kind of needs to agree to bring the band on. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, it's got to be unanimous for you guys.
Yep, generally. And the reason for that is because Metal Blade is a very tight team. And we want everybody to be invested in what we do, because then we expect the bands to give their best. And of course, most bands do. I mean, they're invested in what they do. They love it. They're giving their whole lives for it. So we want to kind of do the same in return. We want to give them something back, and do our part to help.
Yeah,
to
and
help
it's
establish them.
To push somebody that not everybody believes in, because it's, someone somewhere is going to drop something if not everybody's on the same page. So I respect that about you guys. It's such an awesome team that you guys have over there.
It's a lot of passionate people.
So I have one more question, unless Corey has one, but basically, can you kind of go over what would be the main thing that could get your attention, or Ryan's attention, I guess, since he's the main A&R guy, if a band wanted to, get on Metal Blade's radar? What would be like the one thing other than like maybe sales figures?
Well, I think even with him, it goes back to the music. I think he spends a lot of time listening all the time to music, like that's out there, new bands, and just about the discovery. And sometimes it's, well, this isn't one thing, but sometimes the other bands on our labels will bring a band to us, like oh, this local, we had this local act that opened for us and they were amazing, and that sort of thing. But
so how often do you get referrals from other bands? Is that like regular, or is that kind of like out of not regular?
I would say regular.
Okay, cool. Okay, so if you're already working with, or sorry, have open for that band, you probably have a better shot of landing on the radar, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's a good way to make a connection, and that would be the other thing. Make all the connections you can, in the business.
Cool. No, that sounds good to me. Corey, do we have any more questions we want to ask?
Oh yeah, definitely. So we've got her here. We're going to make the most of this time because Tracy is super awesome. Now, switching away from bands, you've been in the industry, for a while, for a bit. And I know there are a lot of people on the flip side of things, people like me who are more behind the scenes and wanting to get involved in the industry. What kind of tips would you have for somebody wanting to get started, either at a record label or, a management firm, just something along those lines to kind of cut their teeth in the industry?
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of like where I started. I mean, obviously you can't always get a job at a record store anymore because there just aren't that many, but there's a lot of other ways you could work with your local venues. You could get a radio show on a local college station, just for starters, or intern. I mean, I'm talking about at the really ground level. But again, it's really about like getting to know people, and I don't know. It's like some of our people came from basically from nowhere. Well, intern, I think a couple of them interned. Diana, who's in the accounting side, which is probably not the most glamorous side. She worked at Hollywood Sound and then worked at Century Media and then came to Metal Blade. But she had some accounting training. Most people want to be into A&R or the more glamorous jobs. So I don't know. It's hard to say. That's ears.
On the surface, those jobs seem glamorous, but they're not always. They're really hard, guys.
Yes, definitely.
So actually, I've noticed that a lot with a few of the people that we've interviewed on here, is they've gotten their start just doing their own thing. Either they started a blog and built up a portfolio, started a radio show, like you said, and built up their own kind of repertoire. But I think my favorite saying was said on here was, your network is your net worth. Mm-hmm. So how would you advise somebody try to build up their network in this industry to kind of, get more opportunities? Are you is it more social media or going to shows, a mix of both? What do you think works best?
Yeah, all of the above. I mean, it's, the network that I've created over the years is different than probably some of the networks that somebody younger might create. I would go to meet them. Like I would go to all the conferences. Like maybe nowadays you would go to Comic-Con instead, or trying to think, or Psycho Vegas. But yeah, so maybe events. I think festivals are a great opportunity where a lot of people are together that are in the industry, and there's often a lot of opportunity there for meeting and mingling with different people that might be able to help.
Oh yeah, that's totally true. The festivals are definitely the kind of the bread and butter of meeting everybody, bands and industry folks alike. But I'm sure, Curtis, you've been quiet for too long and it's making me uncomfortable.
Well,
I'm sure you have to follow up.
I'm in a direction. That's why I was waiting to see where you were going.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, as I mentioned in the other thing we did, Corey, I have sort of a love-hate feeling about social media. So I think some people like Brian Slagle, he has a huge amount of followers and he likes to interact, and I'm not, not everybody is that way. or, you know, I mean, I know
Yeah,
we're supposed to be.
his lives. They're a lot of fun. He hasn't been doing them as much, but yeah, I used to tune into his lives, and I've always appreciated that he was accessible to answering people's questions. That was always yeah, that's a really fun thing. So if people aren't following Brian, y'all should do that.
Yeah. And I always felt like he's kind of a rock star. Like, I'm not really a rock star, but Brian is. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
I feel the same way as you. I'm kind of like why is everybody looking at me?
Yeah.
Where was I going? I was going to ask a question. Oh, it was about internships. People always are asking about internships. How does someone get an internship at like Metal Blade, for example?
They reach out to us. Usually they would talk to Heather in our office, our general manager, and then she sort of figures out if it's applicable, if they have a, you know, applicable sort of interest and experience, and seem like they would be a good fit. And yeah, and we've had it. Usually it's done for college credit.
Yeah.
You know, we're not just expecting free work, but you know.
Yeah. But is there like, so you just reach out to Heather and give your resume? That's just the simplicity of it. There's nothing really else to it. Emailing and saying, here I am, I want to do an internship. Yeah. And
that's just having an interest, you know, and having knowledge, like, you know, maybe if you kind of, you know, you put some, you know, oh my God, I've been to this, you know, it's funny because enthusiasm might be like, you know, I don't know, misconstrued, but it's like, no, I've been to every Cannibal Corpse show since whatever, or what I don't know. Like being able to actually know our catalog might go a long way too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just out of curiosity, where would you just put, okay, so just out of curiosity, so you would be putting that on the resume about your knowledge of Metal Blade stuff? Because that's awesome.
Maybe on the header letter or something, the subject header letter, or, you know, front page.
Because that sounds awesome. Okay, so now can you kind of describe what an internship would kind of be like? Because a lot of people, again, kind of think it's like the glamorous type thing.
Oh,
so
really?
I've heard
it. Yeah, usually it's not. But the thing is, especially now that we're back in the office, more or less, you get to hear a lot because we talk to each other all day long. Like, you know, because we're such a close-knit team, we'll be running out of one office and into the next one. And so you really learn a lot. So though you might be stuffing packages, if you keep your ears open, you will learn a lot about the way a label functions. And it's a difficult business to describe. Mm-hmm. You know, people think from the outside, sometimes people be like, oh, what do you do? You're like a recording studio? No, we sort of cause records to be recorded, and then we market them. Oh, so you sell them to the stores? Well, we have a distributor. You know, it's like, there's a lot of layers of what we do. So I usually say that we're primarily a marketing company, but you know, but there's a lot of other aspects to what we do.
Cool. So I'm just thinking what else I want to ask about the internship aspect. Well, okay, last part about internships is like, how likely would someone be to get a job working with Metal Blade if they successfully did an internship with you guys? Well, I think the general manager started as an intern. I think Heather started as an intern for our publicist. Yeah. And she was just fantastic. And I'm not even sure that working in the music business was where she thought that she was going. But it's a way of life at Metal Blade. But our last intern wound up as a guitar player in our band, Lizzie Borden. So that's kind of interesting too, you know?
You never kind of can tell where you're gonna end up when you break through in this industry. You never know where you're gonna land.
Yep. I got one more question, Corey, unless you got one.
Go for it.
Cool. So how do I want to phrase this? Which band kind of got you into the Metal Blade family? Like what was the actual band that you were the fan of, out of curiosity, that kind of led you, if there was one?
Ooh.
If there was one.
I would say Fate's Warning, but I'm from Connecticut. And then also I met Brian Slagle for the first time at a Princess Pang show at Toad's Place in New Haven in 1988. And then I'm also married to the bass player in Armored Saint.
Yep.
So they were, actually, I'm a big fan of them. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Cool.
It's hard. I can never just name one. I can never name one.
Well, name a couple then. So you can name a couple. That's totally.
Yeah,
It's
I would say
always when
Fates
people ask-
Warning. Yeah.
It's always when
Cool.
people ask, like, what's your favorite band or what's your favorite anything? It's like, okay, I can give you my 3 favorite subgenres, but that's about as much as I can narrow it down.
Yeah.
Pretty much. What else do we want to ask Tracy, Corey?
I am actually good on my end. We've given people, I know it seems like a shorter podcast, but there's a lot of things in here for people to think about and to consider on, before they start label shopping, what they can do. Really beef up your socials, make sure your image is on point, make sure your music is on point. You got to have it all put together before you all start reaching out to labels.
Yep. Tracy, do you have anything final that you want to impart, like any words of wisdom or anything?
Not really, just maybe when you're doing those things, as you mentioned, run it by someone that you know, that you respect, or that another artist in the same genre that you respect, that you're friends with. Get an outside opinion on your presentation, on the music, and on your stats. I don't know, that would be something to think about. Sometimes a band is almost like too close to everything they do.
Yeah,
But
always have the outside person on there.
Definitely.
so that would be it.
Cool. All right. So with that, we're going to end off. Party on, Corey.
Party on, guys.